Hi everyone, welcome to KABA Podcast. I am Tanguy Kabahizi, and I'm here with an important guest, Prince Temeng, on my right. Today it's going to be the first episode, so make sure to enjoy and to understand its importance in the history of African art. So here are we at KABA Art Initiatives. We are at the office. Thank you very much for joining us here, Prince Temeng. How are you doing?
I'm fine. And you?
I'm very good. I'm very good, especially to have you here during our first episode. And I would like to first make you introduce to the audience. Can you quickly say who you are and what you do?
My name is Reverend Prince Temeng, 59 years old, and I'm a Ghanaian artist. I'm a pastor, and I'm also an educator. So I've been in Rwanda for almost a year. And I would say this is my first time in East Africa. But whilst here, I've also been to Tanzania, and I'm back to Rwanda.
Welcome back, sir.
Thank you.
I must say, Reverend, as you are a pastor and an artist and a father and a teacher. So it's a very unique combo, and this is one of the reasons why we've been very honored to have you here at KABA. So as you can see, we have some of your artworks here. Some of your artworks are also on display on our app, so make sure to go on app KABAARTINITIATIVES.com, KABAARTINITIATIVES.com, where you will see not only Prince Temeng's artworks, but also the artworks of the other artists that work with us. So, first of all, can you tell us how you started working as an artist? You said you started this in Ghana, as you are born and raised there, right?
Yeah.
So can you tell us how you started? What happened that triggered this interest in this very unique walk of life?
Growing up, I had this passion to draw and paint. So I would say at the tender age of about 6 years, I started drawing on whatever support I can get, drawing on bare sheets, drawing, on walls. And I also had a talent as a musician, playing the piano. Somewhere along the line, my parents got fed up because they wanted me, to pursue something maybe in law or in medicine. So initially I was restricted from my artistic pursuits. But along the line, they realized that I had that innate talent in art. So they encouraged me, so through secondary school, through university, I majored in fine arts, graphic design, and general art studies at Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Ghana. Mm-hmm. I graduated in 1991. Afterwards, I taught a while. Then as an artist, I felt the urge to travel. So I went around, some countries in West Africa, Nigeria, the Gambia, Senegal, Liberia, Ivory Coast, to exhibit my work. And everywhere I go, I have the passion for children. Like you have already introduced, I'm a father of 6 children. Mm-hmm. So everywhere I go, I try to connect with some schools, organize workshops for children, and also have some time, to teach and impart my knowledge, as an artist and as an educator. So I normally travel to places out of instinct. Some of these places, I don't know anybody. I just go connect with institutions like Alliance Française, or Goethe Institute. Then I exhibit my works, or sometimes I make some contacts with hotels and some tour operators, get venues, then I exhibit my work.
So you've been able to tune in on your instinct and intuition while so many other people, or even your parents, were trying to direct you in another direction. You mentioned that you've been able to major in graphic design.
Yeah.
I suppose that even studying graphic design was not enough to work on your art, which is much more than graphic design. Am I right?
Yeah.
And so how do you go about learning these new techniques of painting, making sure you can put what you have in mind on a canvas? Because for the audience, maybe people don't understand that in the African continent, there are not so many institutions regarding art. So you are mostly learning on your own, informally, with your peers. And as you go, you develop your skills. So how was it for you? How did you develop that along the way of studying and making sure you can live?
When I was in university, my lecturers were always commenting that my designs look painterly. You know, I have that passion for painting, but I decided to major in graphic design, also to get experience, you know. But I would say, for now, I'm into painting. I also do collage. Collage is cut and paste. I also work with mixed media. I also do sculpture in cement, in the round, and in relief. Now, if you look at this one of my artwork, I will say I love color, and especially I blend primary colors with secondary colors, you know, and to project balance, to project movement and rhythm, I use a cacophony of colors. I build upon layers and layers of color to present that vibrancy, you know. So if you look at this work, there are a lot of colors, but I try to simplify the colors to create that balance. So this is a representation, this is a musical performance, especially in the northern part of Ghana, you know, where traditional musical instruments are used. So if you look at this one also, it's like a street scene, you know, normal things that we see, you know, when we go out in the street, you know. So you see this motor, you see this truck behind, you see this woman, and all of these connect to make it aesthetically pleasing to the eye.
So the colors are part of this goal of making it aesthetically pleasing?
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
Exactly.
And how did you find the colors? Because finding all these colors, you know, you have so many different colors on this canvas. Perhaps you don't have all the colors at hand, so you must mix or find exactly what you're looking for. And how does that go? What is the process there?
You know, Tanguy, I'm always experimenting, you know, with the materials available to me. You know, I see Africa as a place where there are a lot of resources, some of which are not expensive. So it's for me as an artist to experiment with the materials available to me, try and mix colors to get the desired impact that I want to project on the canvas. Sometimes I prepare the canvas myself. Sometimes I use paper, I use fabric, I use plant fiber, and I incorporate it in my work. You know, so I would say I'm always experimenting, you know, learning techniques from, you know, other artists, especially now that I'm in this space in Rwanda. You know, I've learned a lot from Rwandan artists. When I was in Tanzania, it was the same. You know, and I guess everywhere I go, I link up with artists, go to galleries, you know, museums, look at the themes presented, and also get ideas to incorporate into my work.
So you're getting inspired by the environment around you,
Exactly.
opening yourself, and tuning in on your intuition and instincts. And so it brings me to my next point, which is you coming from West Africa, you felt like I can do something in the eastern part of Africa, where we are. That's how we met.
Yeah.
KABA Art Initiatives is in Rwanda, and this is where it's based. So we are talking here from Kigali, the capital city. And along the way, with the fact that, again, as opposed to so many artists in the world, we don't, as artists here, African artists don't get the chance too much to get to art institutions like galleries and art schools and everything that we take for granted in the West or other parts of the world are not available here. And yet we have an example like you that goes to places, experiments, learn. The lack of resources didn't keep you from learning and developing your style. So what brought you to the eastern part of Africa? What is it that you felt you could be doing here in Rwanda specifically?
Okay. I am a traveling artist, so I've been to Europe, Germany, to some parts of France. I've been to many countries in Africa. What brought me to Rwanda is adventure. Because I told you, I move by instinct. Of course, I pray as a pastor, tell Holy Spirit, direct me. I don't know where I'm going. I don't have any friend, but always God leads me into the company of creatives, and always I'm well received. Rwanda has been in my mind since 2019. I wanted to come here, then COVID came around and it put my plans on a hold. You know, so last year, I just told my wife, my children, no, I have to move again. You know, so I came here not knowing anybody, you know, but I met some artists. I put up at Ihinji Art Gallery in Kachiru, you know, and I came with the sole aim of collaborating with Rwandan artists because I see a lot of potential here. Many artists here are self-taught, and I like that idea because you learn a lot from such artists. So in November last year, we had a group exhibition, the theme of which was creativity beyond borders, and I headlined that exhibition. Actually, my Rwandan artist colleagues asked me to do a solo exhibition. I said, no, I'm not known here. I would rather collaborate with you to you know, launch my presence here. And it was amazing. That exhibition gave me a lot of exposure. So as I'm here sitting with you in this podcast, I would say maybe there are a few Rwandan artists that I haven't met, but I've interacted with almost, I would say, a great number of them. So I'm happy. Rwanda also is like a second home for me because I love the environment as an artist, and I have access to a lot of materials that I can work with, like clay, like plant fiber, like even water hyacinth. I use it sometimes to texture my work. And here is also exciting. The people are very, very, very receptive, very friendly, and many people even don't believe I'm a Ghanaian because I don't look Ghanaian. Yeah, so I'm trying also to learn Kinyarwanda because it will be easy for me to, navigate. So I'm here to stay. Rwanda is a very exciting place, very clean, very art friendly, and I teach part-time in a school here, Life Roots School, so it has helped me also to engage with school children. And I've worked with a few NGOs here also, and that has afforded me the opportunity to, reach out to the communities and especially engage with women, find out what motivates them to weave, baskets and stuff like that. So I'm happy to be here.
We are very happy to have you here as well. And so it brings me to the next point regarding the differences that you've been able to spot between West and East Africa, which is again a very, very large portion of Africa. When we talk about West Africa, it's many countries, and East Africa is many countries as well. And probably many in the audience might see African as a monolith, as something that is homogeneous. But of course, we as Africans know, traveling and meeting other fellow Africans, even in our countries, that there are significant, sometimes even large cultural differences between sometimes different parts of the same country, and definitely between different parts of a continent. So what did you notice here that maybe struck you and you were, oh, this is something new that I haven't seen in Ghana or Nigeria, especially regarding your work as an artist?
Let me tell you, Africa is diverse, okay, but there's unity in Africa in terms of art. So coming into this space, interacting with artists, I've realized there's not much difference, okay, in especially visual arts and the performing arts, because I can relate to the dance, the traditional dance here in Rwanda, to the traditional dance in, say, Ghana or in Nigeria. Some of the costumes are almost the same. The musical instruments are almost the same. In terms of visual arts, the themes are somehow similar. But I must say that in terms of the concept, I would say here in Rwanda, or I'll generalize it, in East Africa, there's that drift towards wildlife, paintings, which you wouldn't find too much in West Africa. But, looking at themes like this, musical performances, everyday street scenes, they are basically the same. So I have learned so many things here, but I try to integrate it in my work, so that I'll present it not as West African or Ghanaian, but as African. Okay, so there are some series of wildlife paintings that I'm doing, but I fuse it with some elements of West African art, so that I won't be pigeonholed. You understand? Yeah. But I will be able to also reach out to a wider audience.
For example, something that I've seen in many artworks is the subject of the woman. Woman is a very common theme, I've seen it here in East Africa. I've seen it with West African artists. I would say even South Africans, perhaps North Africans have the same. And also the use of color. Many colors, bright colors, pink, yellow, and it, just like my shirt, you know, very bright, very bright, which is something you don't see much in Europe, which is less lively, I would say. Where does that come from, you would think? What is your thoughts on this?
My late mother used to tell me, you know, because my mother was an artist, you know, she was a ceramist, and she did decorations, and anytime my mommy looks at my works, she will say, most of your themes are on women, women, women. Why? Then I said, women are the bedrock of society. Personally, I have a son and 5 daughters. Oh, wow. And I'm the only male amongst my sisters. Okay, so I have that drift towards women. And you consider African women, they rise up early in the morning, you know, do their daily chores, you know, maybe prepare food, go to the market, you know, and stuff like that. So it resonates, you know, the theme of women resonates in most of our paintings. When I came to Rwanda too, I've seen that trend. You know, it's not as if we don't paint men. If you look at this, there's no woman here. That's true. All right? Yes, but for me personally, I like representing women in realistic and in abstract, you know, forms. And of course, if you go, I've been in Tanzania, you know, anywhere, you know, we also love color, you know, because God is the master artist. When I wake up every morning, I look at nature, I look at the color of birds, I look at the color of flowers, trees, you know, I learn shades of color, different hues of color, even blue, I can get about 10, you know, hues of blue. All right. And life is colorful. Without color, life will be very, very dull. You look very, 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 you know, attractive in this, you know, shirt, you know. Compared to mine also has patterns, but you see the color is dull. But look at yours, very bright, very attractive, you know. So for we African artists, we have that privilege, yeah, of using color, because when you look at
hello.
Yeah, so that's why you see a lot of color interplay in especially my work, because I believe if I you know, there are times I do black and white paintings, but it doesn't tickle me enough than, you know, because if you look back at this work, it leads the eye over and over again, and, you know, it creates an artistic balance to the eye.
Yeah. Like every time I look, I can see something new. Okay. And yeah, it goes back to, I think, what an artist is doing. I've heard that many times, that an artist is channeling what he sees or she sees around her or him. And it makes a lot of sense that you're saying that the main inspiration for colors is life around you, and making sure you can put that on the canvas. Exactly. And maybe it requires 10 different type of blue, and if that's what it requires, then we're going to do it. And probably this is why we see a trend in African art, African culture. You were mentioning God is a mastermind, the all creator, and we know that you are an African pastor aside from an African artist. Okay. So how do you combine this too for your everyday life? How does that look like exactly?
I'm privileged to be called by God to serve, you know, and also to use art as a tool to bring hope, to bring healing, and to connect with everyone around me. Okay, and since God has given us that gift as artists, then I believe one day he's going to ask us that the gift that I gave you, what did you use it for? If you go to scripture, there's this parable of talents that God gave, I would say a master. Okay, when he was traveling, he gave money for his servants to keep. All right, some use it, but there's one who did not use it. So when the master came unexpectedly, so he asked each one of them to give account. All right, but this one said, "Oh, I don't want problems, so I kept it somewhere." God expects us, okay, to harness, the gifts he has given us and use the resources available to us and innovate, to create an impact in society. Because art transcends, all barriers. Gender, race, language, social, scale or whatever. All right, so for me, personally, I'm privileged to be an artist. And sometimes people think, how are you going to combine all these things? You seem to be a jack of all trades. How are you going to combine? But, if you believe in God and the abilities God has given to you, then you should be diverse. So for me, to combine my role as a father, as a husband, okay, as a pastor, shepherding, people, trying to bring change in their lives, as an educator, even as a musician, then I thank God. And I'm also very, very, very happy to be part of KABA Initiative, because KABA is like a family. It's so easy for me to connect with KABA and the goals and objectives of KABA, because I believe we have to reach out to a wider audience. African art, I believe, though has made some inroads, still has that ability to make a greater impact in this world.
So this is what you've been attracted by joining KABA, is being able to reach a wider audience on the international platform. And we are happy to have you here, because this is exactly what we want ultimately. And we understand also the way you complement your work as a pastor and as an artist, as a father, and as a husband and a teacher. It all comes into one place, okay, which is bringing the word and the work of God. And it's very much an honor to have you here on the podcast. I would like to ask you a last question that we ask every guest here, which is, what do you wish people to understand about African art, African culture, as you've been able to interact with many people in Africa, but also outside of Africa?
Okay. African art has a very rich and diverse background, and many artists, even the modernists like Pablo Picasso, Henri Matisse, Modigliani, took inspiration from African art. All right? And when I look at the works of contemporary artists like El Anatsui, like Ibrahim Mahama, like, those in the diaspora, like Jacob Lawrence, like Romeo Bearden, like Kelly, if you look at the vibrancy of their work, if you look at the themes that they project, it's not only for aesthetic purposes, but functional, very educational, and very motivational. Okay? God has blessed Africa with a lot of natural resources and human resources.
Aha, human resources.
Okay? Yeah, so when you look at Africa's representation at some of these biennales, like the Vienna Biennale, dark arts, and other international art forums or expositions, you know, and the acceptance of African art, not only in the traditional form in terms of marks and, you know, other, you know, traditional representations, but also in the contemporary. I would say we are rubbing shoulders with our peers, you know, in the Western world. And of course, there has been a lot of collaborations between African artists and European, you know, American, you know, and even Asian artists, which for me is very, very great. So there's still room for improvement. And in terms of marketing also, our Lord KABA, you know, initiative for the great effort you guys are putting it to, you know, incorporate us to open up possibilities in terms of marketing, because of course we must live by the gift or the talent that God has given us. And not only that, African art also has the potential of, you know, serving as therapy for, you know, distressed people, those from, you know, war zones, even patients in hospitals, or, you know, in the correctional facilities like prisons. You know, African art has also that potential to be represented in public spaces, not only in Africa, you know, but outside Africa. For me, I will plead using this forum for governments to invest more into art, you know, knowing that art transcends all barriers. And we artists are like cultural ambassadors, you know, so for us to get greater recognition, governments are doing great, you know, efforts, but I'm using this platform, you know, to encourage that we cannot compete so much with the West in terms of technology. You know, what we have is our culture. We have to rebrand our culture. I'm also happy that KABA is also using high tech, you know, to project art. When I consider your efforts, like you've mentioned, with Arteria, with Sony Music, we will also find out ways of even incorporating music with art and projecting it to the world. So there's hope. I know within a short time, you know, African art will reach the level that all of us expect to be. And it takes me and you, you know, and everybody here, you know, to project that. So the future looks bright for us. It looks very, very, very bright. And it's very, very exciting. It's an adventure that we are treading together. Then God will also usher us, you know, into that higher pedestals that we are all anticipating.
Thank you very much for these very inspiring words. For sure, we are here on an adventure with KABA Art Initiatives, venturing in new spaces, new innovations, new applications of high-tech, also art, music, visual art. You mentioned that you're working on a project these days. Can you tell us a bit more about this?
Okay. Myself and my Nigerian colleague, there's a Zambian colleague, there's a great artist from Sudan, some from Ethiopia, some from Senegal, and Uganda, as well as Tanzanian artists, we are working on a project called Bridging Gaps. We've identified that there are some lapses as creatives that we have to bridge. You know, we come to a common ground, find out ways, we brainstorm, you know, how we can get together, collaborate, and project African art, not only in international art fairs, but to hold open mic sessions where, you know, we sit down and we talk about, you know, African art, music, folk tales, you know, storytelling, and also especially to provide employable skills to especially women, to street children, to the disadvantaged in the society, and those who have been traumatized by, you know, war situations in their country. So we've had 2 sessions already. The third one is ongoing at Simple Living Gallery. Simple Living Gallery is at Chibagabaga. And then last Saturday was the opening of an exhibition which focuses on women. You know, so it's been curated by Jemima Kazizi. She's a well-known Rwandan artist. And it includes, you know, Rwandan artists, 2 Ethiopian artists, another one from Burundi, and it's very exciting. So I'm also using this forum that I'm inviting everyone. The exhibition is going on till I think 2nd week in January, you know, then because we are trying to create that opportunity. Women have been marginalized in Africa for a long time, and children also have that skills that has to be harnessed. And because we are always thinking of white-collar jobs, but we are thinking of ways to engage people with that entrepreneurship spirit, you know, to create jobs for them, you know, things that they can rely on to sustain them, knowing that a man these days is not only the breadwinner, the woman also has to contribute. And also, we are also training children, you know, in schools, not only here in Rwanda. In some of the schools, art is not a core subject. Art has been relegated to the background, but we are creating that awareness and also training children, you know, giving them art tools and materials to work with, and creating that enabling environment for them to realize the potential in, you know, in art, and also to make money from it as well.
Exactly what KABA aims to achieve eventually with KABA Art Initiatives. The goal is to be able to inspire other Africans to start an art career or to do art. And we hope that KABA Art Initiative is going to be able to make them see as well the potential that African art has for the African development, even in the economic field, which is basically how we can make a living as an artist. And with our model, this is what we're going to achieve. Thank you so much for inspiring us with your 40 years career in art, not only art, but also in teaching, as a minister of God, and also as an African husband, citizen, father. We hope to have you again here on the show, and we wish you much success with your project. And of course, you'll be with us on the platform, on the app. So you'll see Prince Temeng, Reverend Prince Temeng, again on the show here, and most importantly on the app. So make sure to go on the website kabaartinitiatives.com, and I'll see you soon for another episode.